Hey up! Right, here we are, part 2 of the Royal Enfield Hunter 350 series. Now, I put a lot of miles on this bike over the weekend. I've revisited some motorway work, I'll let you know about that first. I've also done some proper town work, and I've also been out on A and B roads to see what it's like on the twisties. So, between this video, part 2, and the original part 1, I should be able to give you a good idea of what this bike is like in all road traffic conditions. Now, in the first video, I promised I would revisit motorway work because, you know, the original test was done in extremely high winds. Unfortunately, the second attempt wasn't much better. The problem is the start of the M62 runs all the way alongside the River Humber, which is about, what, a mile and a half, 2 miles wide. So in the winter months, high winds are pretty much a permanent feature. It wasn't quite as bad as I'd sort of encountered last week, but it still wasn't great. Now, what I did find out is, yeah, you know, in winds it will drag the bike down to about 60 miles an hour with the throttle full open, but if you drop it down a cog into 4th gear, in conditions like that, 70 miles an hour is much easier to maintain, but obviously the engine's having to work a little bit harder. It didn't seem to be overtaxing it, but you know, you may prefer not to. But I think that consolidates the fact now that at motorway speeds 70 miles an hour, this bike is pretty much at its limit, but it can do it. Now, one question raised a few times actually in the first video is, was this bike running before I took delivery of it? The answer to that is no, this is a press bike. And the problem with press bikes and with demonstrators, as I'm sure a lot of people know, is that they are ridden like they've been stolen right from day one. So it is fair to assume that the engine on this test bike would still be a little bit tight and certainly wouldn't be running optimally. This bike had, however, had its first service done and the tappets had been adjusted. So I hope that information is useful to you for what it's worth. Now, fuel consumption is something else that keeps popping up in the comments section. Now, on my classic 350, which is basically the same engine and chassis, I can eke out 109 miles per imperial gallon, but that bike is still been running and it's still been ridden sedately. A lot of the work that I've been doing on this bike so far has been motorway work, so, you know, pretty much flat out, stop-start traffic and fast A and B roads. And by my calculations, that's brought the miles per gallon down to 98 mpg, which actually is quite respectable. Just off the top of my head, I think you're looking at 250 miles plus per tank. So anyway, motorway work is not the be-all and end-all of motorcycle travel. It's something I try to avoid as much as I can, to be honest. Let's have a look at the other two road traffic situations that you're likely to hit, probably more often than motorway work. Fast A and B roads, I think, are the natural sort of playground of this sort of bike. Your Saturday and Sunday afternoon runs. So let's have a look and see how she does. Now, this is part of a run that I love doing on any bike when I've got a couple of hours to spare. I come out of Hull on the M62, or the start of the M62, come off the motorway at South Cave, and then follow the road over the Wolds down to Market Wheaton. The only problem is, over the last year, they've dropped a lot of the speed limits. Apart from when you went into the towns and villages, it was pretty much 60 miles an hour all the way through. Now, much of it has been brought down to 50 miles an hour, which does take the enjoyment out of it a bit and did make it difficult to sort of push the bike on the twisties to see how it handled. Now, this is a gradual climb up the Wolds for quite a few miles. Then when you reach the top, it's a gradual sort of plunge down again into Market Wheaton before turning right and then climbing the Wolds again. Royal Enfield have tightened the rake up on the front forks just a little bit. So initially, because I mainly ride the two classics, I did feel that it oversteered a little bit, but I soon adjusted to that. The little 350cc single-cylinder motor had absolutely no problems on these roads. It's absolutely in its element in this kind of environment. I did actually read a review over the weekend that stated that the Seat tyres went up to much. I disagree. This bike corners exceptionally well, far better than the classic 350. And I think you would have to be riding quite irresponsibly, A, to run out of tread on these tyres, or B, to overwhelm them. I didn't find any evidence of them squirming or tracking on road repairs or white lines, although of course that could change as the wear. They are more than adequate for a bike of this size and power. Now, I'm not quite sure whether it's the accomplished handling of this bike or the fact that, you know, in a lot of places they've dropped the speed limit substantially, but it did actually make this road feel a little bit boring. It's quite a challenge on a classic 500. In an enjoyable way, you feel like you're really throwing the bike around. But, and I think I've said this before, this bike sort of feels like it's cornering on rails. I still can't make my mind up whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Now, I have a sort of a test that I put all of these bikes through. As you come out of Market Week and you turn right back towards Hull, and there's a notorious long, steep hill that's about 3 miles long. So notorious that they had to put a crawler lane in for vehicles that can't get up to speed. In fact, up until, I don't know, about a decade ago, they used to have a gravel stopping track right at the bottom of it to catch runaway vehicles. Now, this is just my thing. It's a sort of a test that I put a lot of bikes through. For me, a bike proves its worthiness by whether it can get from the bottom of this hill to the top once you've got up to speed in top gear at 60 miles an hour, which I've got to admit I thought from the start was going to be a bit of a challenge for this little single 350. Don't be fooled by the footage when we get onto it. This is a long, power sapping hill. Now, the way I normally do this is I work my way through the gearbox until I'm at 60 miles an hour, which is the national speed limit for that section of road, and then it has to stay in top gear until I go over the crest of the hill some 3 miles further along. Here we go, let's see if she can do it. Now, as you can see there, the first bit, which is the steepest bit, it pulled her down to about 57, 58, which at first disappointed me, but I held the throttle where it was and I continued. We're still going uphill here, and she came back up to 60 miles an hour and she stayed there until we went over the top of the hill. Now, like I said, I was a little bit disappointed at first, but this hill is notorious. Anyone that lives locally will tell you that. And putting it into context, 2-3 miles an hour, that's less than walking pace. And this is a 350cc single with just 20 brake horsepower. So, actually, I think it did okay. Now, just another note on comfort. I normally do this trip non-stop. You know, when I was filming the other day, I was getting off for breaks and doing some sort of videoing in between. But I was actually on my way to visit a friend and I decided to do this loop first. Normally, by now, there's a lay-by just coming up beyond this caravan that I take a break here because my backside's usually hurting on most bikes. But on the Hunter, I still felt as fresh as a daisy. In fact, another hour riding after this, and I still felt really comfortable. Royal Enfield do an outstanding job when it comes to comfort on their motorcycles. Right, the road had just sort of levelled off here, so we just had one caravan to get past and then into Hull to mix with the traffic and see what the bike feels like there. Now, when it comes to traffic, Hull is not as bad as many cities in the UK, but it can still be bad. If you want to get stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic for maximum sort of length of time, come into Hull via Beverley Road and then turn right onto Cottingham Road and go back out of Hull. It's stop-start traffic for best part of an hour. The good thing, however, is the many bus lanes that we have in Hull, and of course on most of those bus lanes motorcycles are authorised to use them. So I actually made really good progress on the Hunter. One thing I did notice is riding the Hunter, especially in traffic like this, it's like being on a pedal cycle, it's so light. It's absolutely no effort holding this bike up at a standstill for long periods of time. It's clear that Royal Enfield have very much had this sort of environment in mind when they designed this bike. It's got plenty of power for fast getaways at busy junctions and roundabouts. It's not very often I say this about any vehicle in heavy traffic, but the Hunter is a delight. I couldn't get over just how light and nimble it is. So, marks out of 10 for the different sort of traffic categories for this little bike, the Hunter 350. For commuting in congested areas, it's got an easy 10 out of 10. That is what this bike primarily has been built for. Fast commuting on A roads, B roads, or just, Sunday afternoon riding. Again, I've got to give it 10 out of 10. Climbing hills on fast A and B roads, I've got to give it a 9.5 out of 10. It's almost there. Certainly competent, but not quite up to what I know are going to be expectations for a lot of people. And then fast commutes or even touring on motorways and dual carriageways, 8.5 out of 10. And again, that's down to your average person's expectations. Personally, I think it's fine. It will do it, and I'm sure it will do it all day without any drama. But I'm sure it's not going to meet some people's expectations. Now, the next video for this bike will be the actual review video. These are just sort of add-ons that I've put on to try and make, this series a little bit more interesting, really. So, I'll give a summary of this bike in my full review of the Hunter 350. We'll also do a detailed walk around, and then in a fourth video, I'll do the comparison with the Classic and the Meteor that everyone's been asking for. Now, if you don't want to miss those videos, my suggestion is that if you're not already a subscriber to this channel, you subscribe now. Hit the notification bell and ensure that your notifications are enabled. That way, YouTube will let you know when I upload those videos. Once again, thank you so much for helping to support this channel by watching this and my other videos. I really do appreciate it. I'd also appreciate it if you would leave a like. I am, of course, going to be back on Friday, so until then, please, ride safely, and I'll see you soon.